Hello and welcome to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio program from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Laura Kabelka in Berlin. This week on the show, could the election of one single member of the UK Parliament spell the end of Prime Minister Keir Starmer?
It would mean 2 of the safest seats have gone in less than 12 months under his leadership.
Then, wrecking ball politics dominate the Munich Security Conference.
So we would talk about democracy, human rights, rule of law, freedom of speech, or the real freedom of speech. Nothing like that has been mentioned.
We look at the Berlinale Film Festival and how political it is. And we tag along with Ali Akbar, known and loved as France's last newspaper hawker. That's all coming up on Inside Europe. We don't usually report on every by-election in the UK, which are held between general elections to fill vacant seats in Parliament. But this one stands out. Gorton and Denton, a long-time Labour stronghold in Greater Manchester, could be won by either the Green Party or the right-wing Populist Reform Party. Such a loss would further weaken the Prime Minister's already declining support. This much-anticipated election is taking place next Thursday on February 26. Lars Bevanger has been following the campaign.
Dump Reform UK, split up with the Labour Party and fall in love with the Greens.
The Greens candidate, Hannah Spencer, a local plumber, is drumming up support in a local park here in Gorton and Denton. She's fighting Labour's Angeliki Storgi, who arrived to the UK as a student from Greece in the 90s, and Matt Goodwin from the populist right-wing Reform Party, led by Nigel Farage.
I think we just have to show that we want change, we want hope. We can have political parties that are honest and don't divide people. And I think what we do consistently as Greens is work hard and we earn people's trust.
It's an unpredictable three-way contest which has been billed as a confidence test in Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government and in the PM himself.
It is an area where Labour MPs have been returned continuously in every election but one since 1906.
Rob Ford is a professor of political science at the University of Manchester.
Labour can make the claim of history, whereas the Greens can say this is the most unpopular government ever, the most unpopular Prime Minister ever. We are the logical choice for the left. And the risk for both parties and the opportunity for reform is that neither story proves decisively convincing. The vote splits evenly and it ends up going to the right, even though their natural vote is smaller.
Many UK constituencies or electoral districts are relatively homogeneous in terms of wealth and demographics. This one is not. Gorton and Denton is a mix of fairly well-off and deprived areas, some with high levels of immigration, others not. The campaign issues are, you could say, the usual suspects: the economy, the environment and immigration. Hello. So I've noticed your Vote Green sign outside.
Yeah.
Why is it important for you to vote Green in this by-election?
Just the environment.
So I see that your neighbour is planning to vote Labour. Are you worried about a split of the left vote?
No, I'm going to try and convince him to vote Green.
Have you decided which party to vote for?
None of them. They will be able to do anything at all. Greens or reforms. Food is expensive. Bills, electric, gas bills are so expensive.
The reform thing, I just think they're better. And this immigration and things like that, people don't want all that. Because, the communities are changed and, it's no good.
Does he ever look in the mirror and ask himself, is the real problem staring him in the face?
Mr. Speaker, I delivered a
Opposition leader Kemi Badenoch is not the only one laying it into Keir Starmer these days. His appointment of Peter Mandelson, later sacked as US ambassador over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, is the latest in a series of incidents critics say show poor judgment. And if Labour fails here in Gorton and Denton, it would be Keir Starmer's second loss of a supposedly safe seat after the Reform Party narrowly beat Labour in another by-election only last year. Professor Rob Ford again.
So if he lost this seat, it would mean 2 of the safest seats have gone in less than 12 months under his leadership. And that means that there are about 350 MPs who are less secure than the two who have just lost. So that's going to make for a very anxious parliamentary party.
There's a final twist to this unpredictable tale, other than voters switching sides here in Gorton and Denton, and that is whose voters stay at home and whose actually turn up. Lars Bavanger, DW, Manchester.
The Munich Security Conference, which has been held since 1963, is traditionally the most important transatlantic meeting of the year. It's where officials discuss global crises and, at least in the past, where they reaffirmed their shared vision of the international order. But last year, Trump administration officials deeply rattled that comfort zone. This time round, the reaction to the US message was mixed. Terry Schultz was in Munich again and brings us her take for Inside Europe.
The theme of this year's Munich Security Conference was ominous, under destruction. The summary of the pre-conference report began, the world has entered a period of wrecking ball politics. It said the US is leading the way in freeing itself from constraints of the post-1945 international order. The highly anticipated speech of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio aligned closely with that preview, setting off the U.S. against its European allies and their fondness for a stable global system.
We do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline.
But EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas wasn't having it and pushed back at every opportunity to label Europe in broad negative strokes.
Contrary to what some may say, woke, decadent Europe is not facing civilizational erasure. In fact, people still want to join our club, and not just fellow Europeans. When I was in Canada last year, I was told that over 40% of Canadians have an interest in joining the European Union. As the polls show, those who are already members want their union to take a stronger role in the world, to defend our values, to take care of our people, and to push humanity forwards.
On this point, former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis lamented there used to be a lot of common ground with the U.S.
If we talk about the commonalities between the United States and Europe, Rubio did not choose to mention any values, which for decades has been the uniting factor. This has been, so we would talk about democracy, human rights, rule of law, freedom of speech, or the real freedom of speech. Nothing like that has been mentioned. So now we're in an age of interests, where the United States has interests, and they have interests in Europe. So for Europe, it's either you accept those interests, and they become yours, or you don't. And then, basically, my question is, so then if we don't accept those interests, and I doubt that Europeans are ready to accept those interests, what does unite us?
Kurt Volker is the former U.S. ambassador to NATO. He says for all the clashes between the U.S. and Europe under Trump, he believes the alliance is actually better for it.
Donald Trump believes that he is strengthening NATO. He says we've got countries spending 5% of GDP compared to where they were. This is a better balanced NATO. It is more politically sustainable. A second element to a strong NATO is unity and cohesion. And that's been damaged, and the claims to take over Greenland have really damaged that sense of trust and unity within NATO. That has to be rebuilt, but it can be. And I think part of what Rubio was doing here this week is trying to calm things down and get us back into a context where we're talking about working together.
If wrecking ball politics can be turned into reconstruction, but no one is betting on that yet. Terry Schultz, DW, Munich.
Now, Berlin is buzzing. That's because it's Berlinale season. Over 11 days, about 20,000 film industry professionals, including major stars, come to the city. Around 300,000 tickets are sold to the public, making the Berlinale the largest international film festival in terms of audience size. So what makes it special? And contrary to its tradition, has it suddenly become apolitical? I spoke with Canan Turan to help us understand this year's festival and what she calls the other cinema. She's a curator, programmer, moderator, and script consultant who works with the Berlinale.
What is the Berlinale? Why is it so special? It is an A festival. It's one of the biggest and most important festivals in the world. It's open to everyone, not just the stars and the industry professionals. For filmmakers, that means massive visibility, media coverage, and opportunities to meet industry representatives. So in that sense, the Berlinale is both a gatekeeper and a gate opener. Personally, my favorite part as a moderator is the audience Q&As, when everyone meets the filmmakers and they can ask questions about how did they develop the story, why they made certain choices. And those moments are where the real exchange happens.
So what are this year's highlights for you personally?
So I'm a selection committee member of Generations. So there is Matapanqui by Diego Mapache Fuentes. It's an experimental anti-imperialist film about a punk who discovers superpowers. Then we have Four Girls, Cuatro Meninas by Karen Suzane, about four enslaved handmaids in the 1880s Brazil who are daring to dream of freedom and who also make it happen. It's really a beautiful, beautiful film. And from the Panorama program, there is Aru by Sami director Ele Sofe Sara, which also had its world premiere there, like most films. And it follows a reindeer herder fighting to protect her ancestral lands from a mining project, blending political urgency with family tension.
All right. So you mentioned Generation and Panorama. Can you explain what that is?
Generation is the section for youth and children films. And what we mean by that is not just films made with children and youth, but really, really focusing on their emotional lives and on their imagination and on their agency. Panorama has the biggest jury. It describes itself as the section that looks for what is new, daring, unconventional, and wild in today's cinema. And I think that's really summing it up.
What are other components of the Berlinale?
We have the competition. We have special screenings. We have Forum. Then there are the Berlinale talents, where newcomers, but also partly already established filmmakers come together.
And what should people who've never been to the Berlinale know about it?
It's a huge program, and I think sometimes it's difficult to really navigate. But, it's also just worth it to immerse yourself, maybe just watch something you would usually not watch, really be open and dive into the cinema in all its facets, and to look also for films that most probably will not make it to the cinemas here.
I wonder also, so every time I read or hear about the Berlinale, people say it's different to other festivals also because it's more political. How do you feel about that?
Well, it certainly is. I mean, the Berlinale was founded in 1951 in divided Berlin and West Berlin, just 6 years after the liberation of Auschwitz and the end of the Nazi rule. It was never meant to be neutral. It was a political project from the start, back then supported by the US, aiming to position West Berlin as part of the so-called free world.
I'm, of course, also asking this question because on the very first day of this year's Berlinale, there was this incident where independent German journalist Thilo Jung asked members of the jury how they feel about the German government's stance on Gaza. And Jung said that the Berlinale had famously shown solidarity with people in Iran and Ukraine, but not with Palestine. We can quickly have a listen to the response of jury president Wim Wenders here.
We have to stay out of politics, because if we made movies that are dedicatedly political, we enter the field of politics, but we are the counterweight to politics.
Could you respond to that?
I think that answer was evasive. Instead of saying something like, I don't want to answer that question, or I don't have a clear stance on this, he chose to do that. That was his decision, and others that spoke there. But what I can say is in 2024, many Berlinale workers signed a statement, which is still online.
Yes, and also actually this week, 80 film workers and Berlinale alumni condemned the festival's silence on Gaza again.
Yeah, as I already said, the Berlinale is political, cinema is political, festivals in general are political, juries are political, programming is political, and so is silence.
How do you experience working in Germany as a curator and programmer?
I feel like there is more openness to critical voices. And then from time to time, you also make the experience that you can be perceived as too radical, too outspoken, uncomfortable. I just started my own screening series, basically because I think we just need much more of what I call the other cinema, because mainstream film structures are built to concentrate power. They decide whose stories matter, whose perspectives are visible, and who gets to be heard. The other cinema is exactly that space that challenges it. Films by filmmakers who are historically marginalized, stories that don't fit the dominant narratives, and perspectives that are rarely seen on screens.
Do you think the Berlinale and the international film scene in general are inclusive?
They are making huge efforts to be, and they still have a long way to go, I think, on some levels. I try to be optimistic, and this is what I can tell anyone who does not define as just, a member of the mainstream, to be aware of our power and to keep going no matter what.
Canan Turan also hosts her own podcast, Film macht kritisch, to which we will link in the show notes. When was the last time you bought a newspaper? A print copy, I mean. In France, where our next story takes place, there has been a clear and steady decline of print newspaper circulation. But for some, it's still more than just paper, especially when you build a connection to the person selling it. That's still the case in the left bank neighborhoods of Paris, where Ali Akbar is a local hero known as France's last traditional newspaper hawker. French President Emmanuel Macron recently bestowed one of his country's highest honors to the 75-year-old. He has sold newspapers for more than half a century. Lisa Bryant reports from the French capital.
Tagging along with Ali Akbar through the historic Saint-Germain-des-Prés neighborhood is like following a rock star at restaurants where he plies his newspapers, the old-fashioned ones you can thumb through. Everybody seems to know him. And about the award President Macron gave him in January. At an elegant restaurant off Boulevard Saint-Germain, diner André says he's known Akbar since he was a kid 40 years ago. He buys all his newspapers from Akbar and says this neighborhood couldn't exist without him. That's a feeling shared by many.
Everybody knows him. He's a hero of the quartier.
Keeping up with Akbar is exhausting. He's in his 70s but looks years younger. He sprints instead of walking and pounds kilometers of pavement every day, especially during the lunchtime rush hour.
People, they buy me because I'm a funny guy. And secondly, they love me. I'm surrounded by the good people here. So I enjoy with them. That's it. They're like my family,
Akbar works 7 days a week from early afternoon to about 10 p.m., commuting from the southern Paris suburb where he lives. The years when he sold up to 200 newspapers daily are long over. In this digital news era, he only sells a tenth of that amount to regular customers like Tino Le Joly Senneville.
J'ai l'application sur mon téléphone.
She says it's a wonderful tradition. She gets Le Monde newspaper online, but also buys a hard copy from Akbar as value added.
Et je suis prêt à l'acheter une deuxième fois.
In the beginning, when I started to sell the papers in 70s, it was a good business. We were 40 hawkers in Paris. It was not easy, but I was prepared for that physically.
Born in the northern Pakistani city of Rawalpindi, Akbar has worked pretty much all his life.
My parents, they were in a misery, and both of them, they were illiterate. My father has so many children. He was a laborer doing all type of work.
Akbar never went to school. Already as a child, he was hawking popcorn on the streets. One of his customers was a teacher who taught him Urdu and English and how to read and write.
I made a decision that one day I will do something for my mother and for the education of my younger brothers and sisters. I had 7 brothers and 2 sisters. They were all younger than me.
At 18, Akbar immigrated to Greece, where he landed a job on a cargo ship. 2 years later, he docked in France. After working as a dishwasher in Normandy, he headed to Paris and never left.
And I started to sell those papers in Latin quarters.
For a few years, Akbar slept in basements and under bridges.
So 2 nights, I used to sleep in a hotel to wash me and to get some rest. And 5 nights, I was in the basement with a mouse, with my candle.
Today, he knows some of the country's biggest names, like this French senator, Adel Zian, who salutes him on the street and says he met Akbar at Sciences Po University, where President Macron also studied.
I met Macron in that school, and we became friends. And he was a really wonderful boy. He was very brilliant. Sometimes he offered me a glass of wine, sometimes tea, and we talked together.
Monsieur Ali Akbar, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons chevalier.
At a January ceremony, Macron made him Knight of the Order of Merit in recognition of his distinguished service to France.
It was very emotional moments for me. My children, my grandchildren, including my wife and my daughter-in-law, all family was there, and I was received like a king, like a king of...
After all these years here, Akbar is finally applying for French citizenship. He's proud of keeping his promise to educate his siblings in Pakistan and later his children in France. The award hasn't changed his hectic work schedule, although his fan club may have grown.
How long do I know him? Since I'm a teenager. He's an icon. He's an amazing, amazing man with a lot of dignity.
That's Ali Nimrod, creative director of an Italian restaurant that's on Akbar's rounds. He believes the newspaper seller will never retire. It's not the end of an era, Nimrod says. Akbar is a work in progress. Lisa Bryant, DW, Paris.
Welcome back to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio program from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Laura Kabelka in Berlin. Coming up in the next half hour, efforts to rebuild a city destroyed during the Nagorno-Karabakh fighting. Then, US trans people are seeking asylum in the Netherlands. And a pagan tradition is seeing a revival. Wassailing brings communities together in the hope for a good harvest. To the surprise of many football fans, Karabakh, a club from Azerbaijan, reached the Champions League playoffs. Although the team now plays in Baku, it originally comes from Aghdam, a city raised during fierce fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Ethnic Armenian forces took control of the area during a war with Azerbaijan in the early 1990s, after Nagorno-Karabakh declared independence from Azerbaijan. But in 2023, Azerbaijani forces regained the enclave, forcing most of the over 100,000 ethnic Armenians to flee to Armenia. In Aghdam, as Dorian Jones reports from the ruins, there are efforts to rebuild the city.
The detonation of the latest haul of mines cleared from the city of Aghdam. The dangerous work done in freezing weather is led by Elnor Gazamov. He has lost most of his fingers from one of his hands, showing just how risky mine clearance is. Gazamov says that because Aghdam was on the front line of the long conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh, making the area safe again is a huge challenge.
This area is located in the former line of contact. That's why the most dense, territory. We have cleared 300,000 square meters and found more than 10,000 landmines.
How dangerous has it been to clear these mines?
Yeah, we have more than 10 deminers injured, lost their legs, and we lost 2 deminers during the explosive ordnance disposal, because not just landmines, and ammunition also very sensitive. When time passes, they start become very sensitive. It's not a military activity, it's a humanitarian. That's why we have to make sure that when we release the territory to the civilians, they will not hurt. Yeah.
And how long do you think it will take to clear all of this?
We are 5 years in Aghdam, just 30% is finished.
Since the war, access to Aghdam remains strictly controlled, and I visited with a small group of journalists in a trip organized by Azerbaijani authorities. The city of Aghdam was once home to 40,000 people. It was once a cultural center of the region and home to Azerbaijan's most famous football club, Karabakh, which has long since decamped to the capital, Baku. Today, not a single house remains standing. All have been razed to the ground, and even the trees didn't escape the conflict, now a barren wasteland. The historical Juma Mosque was one of the few buildings that survived, being used for animals by ethnic Armenians who ousted the Azerbaijani population in 1993 in a bloody war. Imam Mehman Nezarov, who is 45 years old, proudly shows the fully restored mosque. He says up to 100 people now come for Friday prayers, as the city slowly comes back to life. Nezarov remembers that he was a child when he had to leave the city.
We were forced to leave because of the sound of fighting, which was getting closer and closer. Everyone was terrified and panicked. My mother took me, my sister, and my brother. We left with just the clothes on our backs. We had some support from aid organizations, and we found shelter in a nearby city in a wagon at a railway station, where we spent 3 years. I will never forget those years. We always prayed to God that one day we could return and pray at this mosque. We can't put into words how we feel that dream we had as a child, a teenager, and an adult is finally realized.
Nagorno-Karabakh was historically home to a predominantly ethnic Armenian population. In 1993, they broke away from Azerbaijan, declaring a breakaway republic of Artsakh. But in 2023, in a lightning war, Azerbaijani forces took back the region, creating a new wave of refugees. On Tuesday, Rubin Vardian, a leading member of the breakaway Armenian administration, captured by Azeri forces, was sentenced to 20 years in jail for war crimes by an Azerbaijani court. Richard Giragosian, director of the Regional Studies Center, a think tank based in the Armenian capital, Yerevan, explains the heavy cost paid by ethnic Armenians.
What we saw within 24 hours was the forced expulsion of the remaining 110,000 Armenians from their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh. And the human tragedy there was leaving behind homes, personal possessions, family graves, and coming to Armenia, which was more of a foreign country than many people understand. Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh had very tenuous direct connections to Armenia proper. And unfortunately, this was the cost of the diplomatic breakthrough that we now see.
The diplomatic breakthrough Giragosian mentioned is a step toward better relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. When Nagorno-Karabakh broke away in 1993, Baku cut off diplomatic ties and closed its border. But after the recent war, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan have promised to improve relations. This year, Baku opened its border to allow oil and grain from Kazakhstan to reach Armenia, which is important for Yerevan as it tries to break away from Russia's influence and move closer to Europe. Aykan Jabarov, who manages Aghdam's newest hotel, is hopeful about better relations. His family came from Aghdam and fought in the last Nagorno-Karabakh war. He looks forward to a time when Azerbaijanis and Armenians can live together in Aghdam.
If we look at the history, we lived together before. And now, as you know, every leaders talks about the peace. Nikol Pashinyan said, war finished, we have to make good relationships again. I mean, this is the important word, again. And it will be help both countries' economy, people's social life, regional economy, everything.
The momentum for rapprochement remains, which can only be good news for Aghdam and its hopes for renewal. With Aghdam still in ruins and 1,000 or so returnees living in newly built homes, it will be some time before the city returns to life. Dorian Jones, DW, Aghdam.
And while Azerbaijanis are slowly returning to Aghdam and Nagorno-Karabakh under the Great Return Resettlement plans, Human Rights Watch says Azerbaijan has taken no meaningful steps to ensure the right to return in safety for ethnic Armenians. Did you know that asylum applications in Europe have actually been going down in recent years? That's true in the Netherlands as well, a country that's long been a major destination for migrants and asylum seekers. But one group is bucking the trend: US citizens. Their asylum requests jumped from just 9 in 2024 to 76 in 2025, including several trans people. This increase follows a series of executive orders signed by US President Donald Trump that restrict trans rights. In the current political climate, many fear for their safety. But getting asylum in the Netherlands, a traditionally close US ally, is far from easy for Americans. Our partners at the US public radio show The World aired this report by Orla Bari last year.
Veronica Clifford-Carlos, a visual artist from San Francisco, came out as transgender in 2018. It hasn't been easy, she says.
You know, I deal with on a daily basis when I go outside, deal with people saying, you know, I'll kill you, I'm going to do these awful things to you and nobody will find out. This is the height of people suddenly feeling like, oh, I can say hateful things at somebody and the people in charge are not going to slap me on the wrist for it anymore.
She's talking to me today from a refugee camp in Herlen in the southeast of the Netherlands. Clifford-Carlos arrived at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam on June 10th, approached officials at an airport counter and told them she wanted to seek asylum. Since then, she's been moved between detention centres and camps. But already, she says, it feels different from back home.
You can't go anywhere and expect to not experience some sort of friction, identity friction. But when I experience that here, it's not somebody threatening my life. It's not somebody telling me that I'm going to burn in hell. You know, it's just maybe somebody gives me a look of like, oh, you look odd.
7 days after she applied for asylum, though, her application was denied. Clifford-Carlos challenged that decision in court. Her case is the first of its kind involving a US citizen in the Netherlands, and has been closely watched by several other American nationals, including Jane Michelle Ark.
I'm originally from San Diego, and I left San Diego in '99 and I moved out to the East Coast, and then I lived in San Francisco until I came here.
Here is the Terrapel refugee camp in the north of the Netherlands. Ark, who's also transgender, was a software engineer in San Francisco. Her boyfriend is a surgeon there. And from the outside, she says, their lives looked pretty sweet. Except
they will just approach you on the street and punch you in the face or yell at you or threaten to kill you. Let me give you an example of how much persecution is happening. I was hospitalized for an assault, and the doctor asked me what was going on, and I didn't mention to him that I was getting punched or pushed or shoved like every single week. This had happened so many times that I just didn't even think it was relevant to mention to him other than the day that it happened.
Ark says she chose the Netherlands because she read that it was one of the few countries that has granted asylum to transgender women. But Marlo Schrouver, an expert on migration and a professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands, says things look better on paper.
The Netherlands was the first country in the world to grant refugee status to people based on sexuality in 1981. But since then, very few have gotten this refugee status.
Schrouver says the chances of a US citizen being granted asylum on the basis of their gender identity are incredibly slim. In the eyes of the Dutch government, she says, the US is a safe country, or at the very least has cities that are seen as safe for someone who's transgender.
So if they are in Ohio, they would say things like, yeah, but you could go to San Francisco or New York and be okay.
But, I say, both Veronica Clifford-Carlos and Jane Michelle Ark say they felt unsafe in San Francisco.
What they then look at is if she did turn to the authorities for protection and the authorities denied protection. So, for instance, she goes to the police, reports having been beaten. It's not that you feel unsafe, you actually have to experience violence, for instance. And then if the police says, well, that's too bad for you, we're not going to do anything about it, then in that case, you might stand a chance of getting refugee status.
Dutch authorities are well aware of how the US government has shifted on transgender rights, she says.
And I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. I also signed an executive order to ban men from playing in women's sports.
Trump also called for federal funding to be withheld from hospitals that provide treatments to transgender youth. But Schrouver says none of that is likely to count as grounds for claiming asylum in the Netherlands. There's also one other big factor to keep in mind, she says, when it comes to how the Dutch authorities decide these cases.
It's also a very severe form of criticism on the country. So criticizing Iran or Nigeria or Uganda is one thing, but criticizing the US will not be as easy.
A spokesperson for the Dutch Asylum Ministry told me they're watching developments in the US closely. But so far, they do not have grounds to assume that LGBTQ asylum seekers from the US have a well-founded fear of persecution. Veronica Clifford-Carlos says if her court case fails, she's terrified of being sent back.
More dread than I have ever experienced in my entire life.
For The World, I'm Orla Barry.
You can find and subscribe to PRX's The World wherever you get your podcasts. Since the story from the Netherlands first aired, a lot has happened. So we decided it was a good time to speak again with Veronica Clifford-Carlos. She answered our call from a refugee camp in Heerlen, in the southeast of the Netherlands, near the German border. I began by asking her whether other asylum seekers were surprised to learn where she was from.
So early on, that was the reaction that I got. Very often when I was explaining that I'm a refugee from the United States, people would go, "Oh, the United States, that's so surprising." And now I've actually noticed a significant tone shift where people will ask me, "Oh, where are you from?" I say the United States, and they say, "Oh, my goodness, I'm so sorry for everything that's happening there." And when I explain that I'm a refugee, they go, "Well, I mean, that makes so much sense because so many reasons, honestly."
Okay, so the understanding is increasing in a way. Let's talk about your case, because there are multiple reasons why you applied for asylum, right?
A large portion of why I came to the Netherlands is because I am a trans individual. I am the child of immigrants, first generation, and I am somebody who is heavily diagnosed as mentally ill. And all of these groups, especially trans people, are being targeted directly by the current administration in the United States.
So you came to the Netherlands in June last year. Can you explain what happened since then?
So since then, when I arrived, I got through Schiphol, I got through detention, I had my first interview, and because at the time the United States was considered a safe country, I only had one interview, and then they rejected it. And this was appealed, and the second trial, I was given sort of a positive and a negative response in which they said, yes, the interview, the points that the IND brought up for why you don't qualify aren't sufficient, and you will need to re-interview again.
Can you explain what the IND is?
They're the ones that determine whether or not you get to become a citizen or not. But they also added that the story that I've presented to them about my life has not sufficiently convinced them of my status as a refugee. Right now, it is being appealed.
And why do you think it was not convincing? What would be the reason for that?
Genuinely uncertain, honestly. For example, the fact that I am a first-generation American, and because now ICE is allowed to detain people just on the basis of if they look like an immigrant, it doesn't matter if I'm a citizen of the United States. And this was a point that was brought up during the court case, and it wasn't really disputed in any significant way.
Okay. So have you moved more towards that argument as well, less on the trans aspect then?
It's very difficult to separate any of the issues because, for example, for me, if I were put in detention, I would be put with the men. That's, I'm sure I don't need to explain, a very unsafe position to be put in.
In the piece, we also hear that you have faced multiple forms of harassment, threats, etc. Did you report any of that to the authorities in the US?
No.
Are you worried that that now then plays against you in a sense? Because we heard that this would be a requirement to prove that you went to the authorities and then they didn't do anything about it.
To ignore the context of why I avoided going to the authorities seems a little, I don't know how to describe it other than kind of emotionally miserly. Like, it would be the same as a friend of mine who is from Bahrain as a trans woman. If she were to go to the authorities, they would understand why she wouldn't want to go to the authorities because it's very well documented here what would happen if a trans woman went to the authorities in Bahrain. Because it's not as commonly known, the treatment of trans people by American police officers, they're sort of willing to overlook that because legally, technically speaking, I'm supposed to be okay. But realistically, in practice, that's not what happens. My sisters, my brothers, my trans siblings end up slaughtered.
Do you think anything has changed since you arrived also here in Europe that has been distancing itself from the US more and more? Maybe not because of the Trump's administration's treatment of LGBTQ plus people, but for geopolitical reasons. Do you think this could help your case, though?
That is definitely one of those paradoxes that I've been wrapping my head around, that every time I hear bad news from home, it makes me think, well, at least this will be good for my case. Because one of the big things the IND said was a lot of the things that I was saying were hypothetical, theoretical. But now there is a lot of documentation proving not only that this is happening, that this was happening when I said it, and people weren't looking at it. It's a horrifying situation to sort of predict the rise of fascism in the United States and then watching all of it come true. It causes my heart to sink every day because, that's where all my friends and family are.
So, what's your message to European leaders?
I need people to start talking about what's happening and being realistic about the danger that is building. Because right now it feels like everybody's just trying to ignore the elephant in the room and hope that it goes away. And it's not going away, it's just growing bigger and bigger every day. Black, white, straight, gay, trans, cisgender, everybody is in danger in the United States right now. When I first came here, I was ready to be in the court system for as long as it took. If that took a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade, I don't care. Because anything here is better than anything that I ever had back home.
Are you engaging with the Dutch society? How is it better?
Genuinely, it feels like I'm living in a fairy tale compared to home. Like, people smile at me. People say, Goeiemorgen. Like, people ask me how I'm doing. People talk to me like I'm a human being.
Just one last personal question, if you may. How do you feel? Do you feel supported by other people? Who are you surrounded with? I heard a dog. What's happening there?
Yes, I have Lilith, who is my service dog. She helps with PTSD and other mental health symptoms and situations. I have my friend here who's with me. His name is Elliot. He's also an American in the process.
Hi, Elliot.
Hello, hi.
We have a couple of friends from Saudi and Russia and Peru, Azerbaijan. Like, we
made a community.
And we've all been sort of leaning on each other in a way that is just very powerful.
That was Veronica Clifford-Carlos speaking to me from a refugee camp in the Netherlands. A quick reminder of our feedback address, insideeurope@dw.com. I'm Laura Kabelka in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. Our final story is about something I had never heard of before. Wassailing. Well, clearly I am not from the UK. Wassailing is an old pagan tradition where people visit fields and orchards to wake up fruit trees and bless them for a good harvest. They sing, shout, and make loud noises to scare away bad spirits. In recent years, the custom has made quite a comeback in England. Inside Europe's Ashish Sharma joined a wassail to learn why it's become popular again.
So here we are, a winter wassailing. So we come to make a joyful noise with bottles, pots, colanders and pans to scare away nasty spirits that might haunt this precious patch of land.
It's a wet Saturday morning and over 100 people have gathered in West London in Barnes Common, a local nature reserve on common land, to go on a wassail to bless a community orchard and its apple trees.
Be gone, you naughty, malevolent imps, elves and sprites, for we make merry with music, dance and bonfires on this winter's spring morning.
James was our butler or wassail king, which is a title given to the person who leads the ceremony. Well, the wassailing group has started its walk. We are actually standing by a railway crossing waiting for a train to come across, all in their fancy dress, masks, and there are just cars lined up on the roadside, just people looking at us, wondering what on earth is going on. Have you been to Wassailing before, or is this?
Once before. We went last year.
Okay. And what made you want to go to that?
Get drink and sing to the trees.
That's a good enough reason.
I think so.
My name's James Lloyd Pegg. This is Joe Evans.
On guitar?
I'm on guitar. Well, I think wassailing is something that's very much on the rise. I think it may have something to do with the high-tech world that we live in. You know, I love the fact that we've got youngsters here, we've got babes in buggies and prams, and when we do the storytelling, we like to get the youngsters involved in that. It's a very ancient thing. There are lessons we learn through stories as well. And when I started choosing stories or writing stories for Wassail, I realised that a very good source of material was Native American Indian stories, because they're all about community and where do I fit in.
You brought your two kids.
My two nephews.
Oh,
yeah.
your two nephews.
Yeah, I thought it would be really nice for them to, experience something of a tradition, a nice old tradition. Keeping in touch with nature, and away from screens, and in touch with our kind of folk traditions and all those sort of things as well.
The name Wassail comes from the Norse. It's the Middle English Weshail, meaning your good health and your prosperity. Farmers would wassail their trees by pouring drink over the roots and rubbing salt into their branches to ensure that the coming year would bring a bountiful harvest.
I think that we need to reconnect with the land, and I think that wassailing is an amazing way to do that, which is why I came today, because I think it's really important that we celebrate some of these ancient traditions, because so much of our history is rooted in the world around us, and more we're losing touch with that. So whatever we can do to bring people together to sing and to celebrate trees, why not?
When bitter February winds do puff, bellow and blow, sprites, trolls and goblins emerge from the dirt below.
Jackie Marie, who organises the Barnes Common Wassail, says it came from an idea to bring the local community together in appreciation of its environment.
We planted an orchard several years ago on the Common, the one that you went to today, and we wanted to engage the community a bit more, and it has grown quite a lot. I think a lot of young people are really interested in connecting with nature these days, so they're seeking out these types of activities.
May God send our master a good crop of corn and a good crop of...
According to the Tradfolk Wassail Directory, which is a voluntary platform, there were more than 70 public wassail events in the UK in the winter months of last year. While the directory doesn't hold a database for events from previous years, it does show that in the last 12 months, wassails have spread widely and away from traditional cider-making regions and are becoming more popular even in urban centres like London, of which Barnes Common is one such example. This shows a desire for local communities everywhere to hold on to traditions, especially those that forge a closer bond to nature. Ashish Sharma, DW, London.
And that's it for today. This program was produced by Thomas Barrow and me, Laura Kabelka. Our sound engineers were Jürgen Kuhn, Luzi Krupp, and Michael Springer. If you want to make us happy, you can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn and Berlin.